I noticed the birthmark on my son's neck that my wife Elizabeth never did. 666. The numbers looked to be written in red ink, and were clear as day. Who did this? I shouted angrily, looking around the room for any sign of guilt. Joshua had been born 2 hours earlier, and while I hadn't left the room for more than a few minutes, someone had to be responsible. But the doctor's puzzled look was genuine. What are you referring to? He asked. I'll show you what I'm referring to, I yelled, picking my son up and walking back over. This. His eyes looked down intently, and then back up at me. There's nothing there, he said, not unkindly, as he gestured towards my son. When I looked back down at Joshua, his neck was completely normal. Blank. I'm so sorry, I said awkwardly, placing my son back with my wife as she gave me an angry look that would have been even worse had she not still been partially doped up from the meds. That was the first time I noticed something was not exactly right with my son. Which brings me to my first rule. Keep frightening and unusual occurrences to yourself. ***. 5 years went by, and though my son seemed social and friendly enough around my wife and I, he was unable to make a single friend at school, even the teachers feeling a general uneasiness around him. No one would give me a straight answer as to why upon each playdate, the other child would always inevitably end up crying. One particular father was so upset that he called me. Is this Joshua's father? He asked angrily. Yes, I'm his father. What is? Our dog is missing. We think your son had something to do with it and... Excuse me. I interrupted. Did you just make an accusation against my son? Quote. Before he could respond, I continued. Your dog probably ran away, or got hit by a fucking car or something. If you call me again to complain about Joshua, the next conversation we have won't be over the phone, it'll be face to face. Quote. I could hear the fear in his voice as I hung up the phone. I wonder now if the fear he felt wasn't for me at all. Joshua. I yelled downstairs, get in here, now. A moment later his dark brown eyes were staring up innocently into mine. Yes, Daddy. I just got a call from the Jones. I evaluated the look in his eyes as he listened. Did you have anything to do with the dog going missing? My son's expression changed from innocent to cold. It growled at me, so I killed it, he said matter-of-factly. I stared at him blankly, taking what must have been 10 seconds to process what I had just heard. Go to your room, Joshua. But Daddy, Now Joshua, your mom and I are going to talk over what needs to be done. ***. 2 days later, it wasn't just the Jones dog that went missing, it was their entire family. The husband, wife, and 2 little boys all up and vanished during the night. All the doors were locked from the inside, with no sign of a struggle or foul play. Their new Toyota Prius was still parked neatly in the driveway, and the keys were inside the ceramic fruit bowl on the kitchen table. The police were stumped, but I had my theories. And I had my nightmares. Which brings me to rule number 2. Never let animals around your child, ever. It wasn't just the dog. Ever since my son was born I had been finding dead birds scattered about through our yard. And it was other things as well. The woods behind our house that were once filled with the murmur of crickets and other tiny creatures at night were now dead silent. ***. Months went by, and Joshua and I never spoke about the incident again. I'm ashamed to say that I was afraid to, and I wanted more than anything to pretend that none of this was really happening. Part of me did want to tell my wife Elizabeth my suspicions, but how could I? It was her son too, and most of what I felt was just that, feelings. It wasn't until the night of his 6th birthday that I found the courage. After making sure Joshua was still busy playing in his room, I walked down the hallway to our bedroom and locked the door behind me. Elizabeth, can we talk for a second? Before I could continue, she replied. David, I'm scared. There's something about Joshua, I interrupted. I know. The two of us stared at each other for a moment, surprised yet not. She hugged me close. What do we do? She asked. And then the lights went out. Where's your phone? I asked. Kitchen. Yours. I shook my head. I don't know, I replied. And then the music started. First quiet and almost imagined, and then louder. Is that what I think it is? I asked, swallowing nervously. My wife nodded. Chopin. Sonata No. 2. I looked back at her in disbelief. Is it a recording? I asked, but I knew the sound of our grand piano well enough. Joshua had never even practiced before. As the soft murmur of the piano began to swell, the echo throughout the house became ominous, even violent. Elizabeth and I sat down on the bed together, holding each other's hand worriedly. Her eyes stared into mine as she found the courage to continue. I don't think he's our son. That's crazy, right? I said nothing, only pulling her closer and trying desperately to block out the terrifying melody. Hat was pushing its way into my mind. For a moment I thought of escaping through the window, but our bedroom was on the steeper side of our home. It was far too high to try and jump out of. The sonata finished, the dark growl of the piano dying down and finally becoming silent. I pressed my ear up against the wooden door, after a moment hearing the soft patter of footsteps on the other side make their way closer. Knock, knock. Daddy. Mommy. I searched for the right words as I tried to hide my fear. Stupidly, I said the first thing that came to mind. Joshua, you aren't mad at us, are you? There was silence. And then the voice continued, but this time it wasn't the voice of the little boy I had known for the past 6 years, it was much deeper. It wasn't a little boy's voice at all. That depends. Am I still your son? My eyes drifted towards my wife, terrified and crying on our bedroom floor. I wasn't far behind. Yes. Say it, Joshua commanded, still in that much older voice. You're our son, I said softly. A minute or so of the most terrifying silence followed, and then the familiar voice of a child returned. Good daddy. Now come out so we can eat some cake. I looked at my wife nervously as my hand unlocked the door. Before it was even opened completely, Joshua took my wrist and led me into the kitchen to do the honors. Which brings me to my third rule. If they tell you to keep pretending, do it. It's not so bad after a while, not so different really from raising a real little boy or girl. Just remember to follow the rules, and maybe you'll even stay alive. At least that's what Joshua keeps telling me.